What if Mario became the villain?
Chapter 1. The Shadow of the Star. The Mushroom Kingdom had always known peace, a vibrant tapestry woven with the laughter of toads and the gentle rustle of warp pipes. At its heart stood Peach's castle, a beacon of alabaster and rose, and at the heart of its lore stood its greatest hero, Mario. With his iconic red cap, his booming, cheerful proclamations, and a mustache that seemed to hold a permanent smile, he was the bulwark against the darkness. Time and again, he had faced down the monstrous Bowser, dismantled his armies, and returned Princess Peach to her throne. And always, he would secure the kingdom's soul, the superstar, an artifact of celestial power that pulsed with the very essence of hope. But the brightest lights cast the longest shadows, and beneath the idyllic surface of this celebrated peace, a subtle corruption was taking root. It began as an almost imperceptible shift, a change in the hero's bearing after each victory. The adoring cheers of the toads, once a warm bath of gratitude, now seemed to feed a different kind of fire within him. He would stand on the castle balcony, the superstar cradled in his gloved hands, its gentle warmth a comfort that was becoming a possessive thrill. His gaze would sweep across the kingdom, not with a guardian's contentment, but with the assessing eye of a king. Luigi, ever the quieter, more observant brother, noticed it first. He saw the way Mario's grip tightened on the star when a courtier got too close, the way his smile became a fraction too wide, too fixed during the victory parades. "Brother," Luigi ventured one evening, finding Mario in his study, the superstar glowing on a velvet cushion. "Are you all right? You seem restless." Mario turned, his expression carefully neutral. "Restless? No, Luigi. I am vigilant. The kingdom relies on me. The princess relies on me." Mario's voice was flat, without emotion. He gestured to the star. "This is a great responsibility. The people need to know their savior is strong, unwavering." But the unwavering strength Luigi saw was an unsettling rigidity. Mario began to dismiss council meetings, claiming his instinct was all the guidance the kingdom needed. He started to patrol the castle grounds late at night, his mind a fortress of paranoid strategies against a threat he could not name. He believed the world was a fragile thing, and only his unyielding will could hold it together. Meanwhile, in her private chambers, Princess Peach was not a captive waiting for rescue. She was a ruler, her mind burdened with a heavy calculus of her own. The constant abductions were not random attacks. They were a diplomatic crisis. Each time Mario rescued her, it triggered another cycle of violence, another wave of destruction across her land. The toads were tired of rebuilding. The gardens were scorched, and the kingdom's treasury was draining to repair the damage. The last time Mario had returned her, she had met with Bowser in secret. The truce had been tentative, brokered by a wise old toad elder and sealed with an unspoken understanding. Bowser had not wanted to kidnap her. He had been trying to get her attention, to force a conversation that her people, terrified by his reputation, would never allow. The abductions were his crude, desperate attempts at diplomacy. Their last meeting had been different. Peach had ridden a Cloud Koopa glider to a neutral zone, deep in a swamp between their two kingdoms. She had landed in a clearing, the air thick with the scent of sulfur and marsh grass, and stood alone. A moment later, the trees had parted, and Bowser had emerged, his immense form radiating a sullen heat. "Princess," Bowser rumbled, his voice a low, gravelly thunder. "You came." "I did, King Koopa. We need to talk about this cycle. It's destroying my kingdom, and I suspect it is not without cost to yours." Bowser looked away, his spiked shell bristling. "My people are tired of war, and my son, Bowser Jr., wants to play, not fight." He'd paused, and when he'd looked back at her, his dark eyes had held a surprising weariness. "The truth is, Princess, I'm just trying to keep your kingdom from being destroyed by something else. By the only thing that's a bigger threat than I am." "And what is that?" Peach asked, her voice calm. "The hero, Mario." He had explained everything. The superstar was not just a symbol. It was a living artifact of power that, if held by a mortal for too long, began to warp them. It fed on the adoration of the people, growing stronger, but in doing so, it slowly consumed the wielder's humility and empathy, replacing it with an absolute, unshakable sense of self-righteousness. It was why Mario's victories were becoming more aggressive, why his smile had a glint of steel, and why he saw every disagreement as a betrayal. Bowser had seen it before in ancient Koopa texts. An all-powerful hero, celebrated without question, eventually becomes a tyrant. His desperate kidnappings were a plea, a way to remove the star from Mario's possession, to force a reset before it was too late. Peach had returned to her castle, her heart heavy with this new knowledge. The superstar, glowing warmly on its cushion in Mario's study, was no longer a symbol of hope. It was a cancer, slowly turning her savior into her greatest threat. Her captures by Bowser were not acts of aggression, but acts of protection. Staying with him for a time was the only way to keep the star out of Mario's hands and protect her kingdom from his growing, benevolent tyranny. But Mario did not see her as a ruler with her own agency. He saw her as a damsel in distress, an object to be saved, a prize to be won. And that was a mistake that would soon change everything. Chapter 2. The Golden Cage. The next abduction was different from the others. There was no boisterous parade of Koopa Troopas, no dramatic sky fortress floating above the castle. Instead, a single, black-armored Koopa knight with a message scrawled on a heavy parchment arrived at the castle gates. It was a formal invitation, signed by Bowser himself, requesting a diplomatic summit at his fortress to discuss a new era of peace. The Toads, accustomed to decades of animosity, looked at the message with fear and confusion. Mario, however, saw only an insult. "A summit?" Mario roared, his voice echoing in the grand hall. "This is not a summit. This is a challenge, a taunt." Luigi stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Maybe it's not, Mario. Maybe he's serious. The kingdom is tired of fighting, and Peach. The princess is a pawn in his game, Luigi. He seeks to sow discord, to make me doubt myself. But I know my purpose. I am her protector, her hero." Mario's voice was low and dangerous. Peach, standing quietly by her throne, finally spoke. "Mario, I believe we should consider it. A peace treaty would be a great victory for the kingdom, far greater than any battle. It's a chance to end the cycle." Mario's smile vanished. He turned to her, his eyes narrow, and his voice like chipped ice. "Princess, you are naive. He is manipulating you. Don't worry. I will go. I will attend his summit and show him the true meaning of peace." He strode from the room, his cape billowing behind him, leaving a cold silence in his wake. Peach turned to Toadsworth, the ancient royal steward. "Toadsworth, gather the royal guard. We must go to Bowser's castle. The time for hiding is over. We need to do this ourselves." "But, Princess," Toadsworth's mushroom cap quivered with worry. "Mario, he will not approve." "I know," Peach said quietly. "But this is not about his approval anymore. This is about the safety of my people. It always has been." When Mario arrived at Bowser's fortress, he expected a trap. He expected legions of enemies, fire-breathing piranha plants, and a dramatic final battle. He found none of it. The main hall was empty, its immense stone floors scrubbed clean. There were no cages, no pits of lava, just a massive throne and a table set for two with a delicate tea service. Bowser was not on his throne. He was standing by the table, looking out a large window at the jagged mountains. "Mario," Bowser said, not turning, "I trust you got my invitation." Mario bristled. "Invitation? This is the end of the line, Bowser. Where's the princess? What have you done with her?" "Done with her?" Bowser finally turned, his expression one of weary confusion. "She's here. She's fine. We're having a summit. It's what the note said." Mario's mind, warped by the star, could not process this. A summit? A truce? The Koopa King didn't want to fight? It didn't fit the narrative. It didn't fit his narrative, the narrative where he was the savior and Bowser was the monster. It had to be a trick. "Lies! This is a charade. You will not fool me. You will not have her." Mario's voice filled with righteous fury. He launched himself forward, a fiery fist flying. Bowser didn't move to fight back. He simply raised a massive, armored hand, and a wall of reinforced stone shot up from the floor, separating them. "I tried to do this peacefully, Mario," Bowser rumbled, a note of sorrow in his voice. "For our people, for her kingdom. But you won't allow it, will you? You can't. It's not in your nature anymore." Just then, a side door opened, and Princess Peach walked in, followed by her own royal guard. She was not in a cage. She was not in distress. She wore a simple white dress and looked at Mario with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "Mario, stop. He is telling the truth. I am not a prisoner. We are here to create a lasting peace." Peach's voice was calm but firm. Mario's world collapsed. He looked at her, then at Bowser, then back at her. The image of the damsel in distress, the one he had spent his life saving, was gone. It was replaced by a woman in control, a ruler who was making her own choices. He saw her not as a prize, but as an equal to his greatest enemy. And in his corrupted mind, that was the ultimate betrayal. Chapter 3: The Unraveling. Mario's retreat from Bowser's fortress was not a flight of a defeated hero, but the withdrawal of a king from a battlefield he refused to acknowledge. The world, as he had known it, was a shattered mirror. Peach was not a damsel. Bowser was not a pure villain. The glorious narrative of his life, built brick by brick with coin and mushroom, had been revealed as a lie, and the superstar, a cold, hard stone in his possession, began to whisper to him. "It's a trick. She is under his control. He has bewitched her, or worse. He has replaced her with a decoy. Mario's voice was a low rumble, filled with paranoia. Back in his private chambers, he paced, the superstar held tightly in one hand. Its gentle glow was now a searing heat against his palm. It fed on his belief, on his certainty, and his shattered certainty was a feast for its growing power. He looked at Luigi, who had been waiting for him, his face etched with concern. "Mario, please, just listen to me for a moment," Luigi pleaded, a new firmness in his voice. "She wasn't a prisoner. She was happy. She was at peace. Don't you see? Maybe this is what's best for everyone." Mario stopped. His eyes, usually a warm blue, now held a cold alien light. He looked at his brother, not as a confidant, but as an enemy of the truth. Happy? How could she be happy with that monster? You, my own brother, have been fooled. You see with your heart, Luigi, not your head. You don't see the truth. But I do. This is a grand conspiracy to disarm the kingdom, and I am its only protection. Mario's tone was condescending and sharp. Luigi stepped back, a flicker of fear in his eyes. He had never seen this side of his brother. The unwavering hero had become a fanatic. Mario turned his back on him, staring out the window at the distant, spiny silhouette of Bowser's castle. The superstar pulsed, a heartbeat of pure light in his hand, and for the first time, Mario wasn't just holding it. He was listening to it. Its voice was a chorus of all the cheers he had ever received, a symphony of all the grateful sighs of the toads. It told him he was right. It told him his brother was weak. It told him Peach was a fool to trust the beast. It told him that the only way to restore the world was to take it back by force, to prove his heroism once and for all. In the days that followed, Mario's descent was rapid and terrible. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping. His waking hours spent poring over ancient maps and battle strategies. He declared martial law, claiming it was for the kingdom's protection. The toads, once his adoring public, now watched him with a wary, fearful silence. They saw the bags under his eyes, the twitch in his jaw, the terrifying calm with which he now held the star. It was no longer a gentle, hopeful light. It was a weapon waiting to be unleashed. One evening, he called a meeting of the royal guard, not in the stately throne room, but in the echoing, torchlit armory. He did not ask for their allegiance. He demanded it. He laid out a plan for a full-scale invasion of Bowser's kingdom, a preemptive strike to liberate the princess and end the Koopa threat forever. The captain of the guard, a wise old toad who had served for generations, spoke up. "Sir, this is madness. We cannot declare war on a kingdom that has offered us peace, the princess herself." The toad captain's voice was low, respectful but firm. "The princess is not herself," Mario roared, a flash of red-hot anger in his eyes. He slammed his fist on a wooden table, splintering it. "She is compromised. I am the hero. My will is the will of this kingdom." The captain was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, he unbuckled his sword and laid it on the broken table. One by one, the other guards followed suit. They chose loyalty to their ruler, not her self-proclaimed savior. Luigi, who had been watching from the shadows, stepped forward. He stood before his brother, his own fear swallowed by a growing sense of duty. "Mario, you are scaring the kingdom. You have to stop." Mario looked at his brother, his face a mask of disappointment and rage. The superstar in his hand flared with an incandescent light, and a powerful, invisible force slammed into Luigi, throwing him against the stone wall. He crumpled to the floor, stunned, but not seriously injured. You see, the star knows the truth. It is a tool for the righteous. And I, Luigi, I am its master. Mario's voice was a cold whisper, filled with terrible finality. Mario turned from the armory and walked out into the night. The toads of the kingdom watched from their windows, their faces pale in the moonlight. They saw a figure, bathed in the blinding light of the superstar, marching alone towards the distant mountains. He was not a hero on a quest, but a king on a crusade, and he was taking his kingdom down a path from which there could be no return. Chapter 4. The First Blow. The journey to Bowser's fortress was a lonely one for Mario. He did not need an army. The superstar, pulsing with an aggressive, hungry light, was all the power he required. It was no longer a tool. It was an extension of himself, and with it, he could leap farther, run faster, and conjure fireballs with a new, terrifying intensity. The land around him, once lush and green, seemed to wither in the wake of his passage. The peaceful, cooperative toads he encountered along the way, who offered him no resistance, were met with an almost surgical coldness. He was not there to speak, only to conquer. Meanwhile, at the Koopa fortress, a fragile peace had begun to blossom. Princess Peach and Bowser were not allies in the traditional sense, but they were collaborators in a desperate attempt to avert a war. They spent their days in the fortress's library, poring over ancient texts and discussing strategies. Bowser, surprisingly, was a patient and thoughtful host. He had opened his kingdom to her, showing her the surprisingly organized and family-oriented society he presided over. She met Bowser Jr., a small, boisterous Koopa who was more interested in drawing pictures of castles than in fighting. And the sight of Bowser, the fearsome king, reading bedtime stories to his son was a revelation. "Your kidnappings were a mistake, Bowser," Peach said one afternoon, looking at a faded tapestry depicting a hero holding a glowing star, his eyes filled with a subtle madness. "You should have come to me sooner. We could have avoided so much." Bowser sighed, a plume of smoke curling from his nostrils. "I tried, but the fear, it's strong. Fear of me, fear of the unknown. And Mario, he is a powerful symbol. The people want to believe in a simple story. Hero and villain." "I know," Peach said, her voice filled with a quiet sadness. "He is trapped in that story. But the star is what's truly trapping him. It feeds on the narrative, on the black and white. It hates the gray." Suddenly, the fortress shuddered. A tremor ran through the stone floors, and a distant, fiery explosion echoed through the halls. Bowser's eyes snapped to the window, and he roared, "He's here." Bowser's voice was a low and terrifying growl. Mario arrived not at the front gate, but on the castle roof, a single devastating fireball blasting a hole in the stone. He landed in the courtyard, the superstar a blinding sun in his hand. Koopa Troopas, confused by the sudden aggression, ran from him, not daring to fight. He was no longer a man. He was a force of nature, an unstoppable storm. He made his way through the castle, not fighting, but destroying. The Koopas' prized art, their ancient texts, the carefully tended gardens, all were incinerated by his fiery wrath. He was a cleansing fire, burning away what he considered to be evil and falsehood. Bowser found him in the great hall, standing alone amidst the smoldering wreckage of a banquet table. Mario. Bowser's voice was filled with a primal rage, his knuckles white. What is wrong with you? We offered peace. You broke it. Mario simply smiled, a chilling, vacant expression. He held up the superstar, its light so bright it seemed to burn holes in the air. I am not breaking peace. I am ending a war, and the first step is to remove its architect. You. Mario's voice was unnervingly calm and final. A torrent of fire, far hotter than anything a Koopa could produce, erupted from Mario's hands. Bowser met it with his own blast, and the two forces of fire, one imbued with rage and the other with a cold, righteous fury, collided in a deafening roar. The very foundations of the fortress trembled. But Mario was not just fighting to win. He was fighting to erase. Every punch, every fireball was meant to annihilate, not just to defeat. He was no longer looking to save Peach. He was looking to destroy the one who dared to challenge his reality. He was not a hero. He was a tyrant. And he was winning. Chapter 5. The King of Ashes. The battle was a massacre, not a conflict. Mario, wielding the superstar, moved with an unholy grace. His jumps were arcs of pure fury, each landing a concussive blast that shattered stone and sent Koopa Troopas flying. He was a force of entropy. The air around him shimmered with a heat that scorched the ground, leaving behind blackened glass and a faint smell of ozone. Bowser, a being of fire and fury, was outmatched. Every blast of his breath was met with a hotter, more concentrated fireball from Mario's hands, forcing him to retreat, his immense hide blistering under the assault. Mario didn't just defeat his enemies, he erased them. A Goomba was not merely stomped, but disintegrated into a shower of light. A piranha plant was incinerated before it could even bite. He moved with a terrifying precision, his face a mask of cold, triumphant focus. The superstar pulsed and hummed, a constant whisper of validation in his mind. This is what you were made for. This is your true purpose. They were never your enemies. They were simply in the way. Bowser roared in defiance, his voice a guttural thunder that shook the very foundations of his home. He charged, a spiked shell of righteous fury, but Mario simply sidestepped the attack with an impossible agility. He slammed a fist into Bowser's side, the impact cracking armored scales and sending the Koopa King skidding across the hall. Bowser was a fighter, a brawler, but Mario was a god, fueled by the righteous, destructive power of the universe itself. This is not a game, Mario, Bowser bellowed, smoke and fire pouring from his mouth as he struggled to rise. You are destroying everything. No, Bowser, I am setting it right. This is peace, my kingdom. Mario's voice was filled with a chilling, detached finality. The words were an ice pick to Bowser's heart. He looked at the wreckage of his home, at the fear on the faces of his minions. He had to concede. This was not a fight he could win. Not with brute force. Not yet. He let out a final, pained roar and retreated, turning his back on his home and the self-proclaimed hero who was now standing on its ashes. He had to get to Peach. He had to warn her. Mario watched him go, then turned his gaze to the smoking ruins around him. The Koopa throne, a symbol of Bowser's reign, was now just a pile of broken rock. With a casual flick of his wrist, a new throne, molded from molten stone and glowing with the inner light of the superstar, rose in its place. He sat upon it, the king of ashes, surrounded by the silence of his victory. He was the hero. He was the king. And the world would be next. Chapter 6. The Tyrant's March. A year passed. The world had changed. Mario, now known to some as the Star King, was no longer a hero. He was a conqueror. The superstar, now a permanent fixture embedded in his chest, had transformed him. His eyes glowed with its power, and his voice, once cheerful and booming, was now a resonant, chilling command. He had marched across the various worlds of the Mushroom Kingdom, his army of repurposed Koopa Troopas and Goombas following in his wake. He did not rule with tyranny, but with an almost surgical, cold order. He fixed the piranha plant problem by turning the species to stone. He helped the Lakitas by forcing them to fly in a perfect, rigid formation. His power was absolute, and he saw no reason for dissent. He was a benevolent dictator, an obsessive perfectionist who believed he was creating a utopia. Every world he saved became a reflection of his own rigid, soulless order. Meanwhile, back in the Mushroom Kingdom, a resistance was born from the despair. Princess Peach, Bowser, and the remnants of their forces had been in hiding. They had formed a fragile, unlikely council of war. Bowser, humbled by his defeat, was now a weary strategist, and Peach, hardened by her choices, was a leader. She had no crown, no castle, but she had the unwavering loyalty of the Toads and the grudging respect of the Koopas. They were no longer the Mushroom Kingdom or the Koopa Kingdom. They were simply the Resistance. The plan was simple, if not impossible. Mario, in his arrogance, was marching towards Peach's castle to make it his new throne. He would bring with him the full force of his conquered armies. Bowser, with his knowledge of Koopa battle formations, and Peach, with her understanding of her own kingdom's terrain, had laid out a plan for a last stand. They were outnumbered and outmatched in terms of raw power. But they had one thing Mario had lost: empathy. He will not see us as an army. He will see us as an obstacle. He will think he can simply erase us. Peach's voice was low and filled with grim resolve. She looked out over their assembled forces, a mix of toads, Koopas, and other creatures from the various worlds he had liberated. We must show him that we are more than that. We are a kingdom. The final confrontation would take place at the gates of Peach's castle, the very place where Mario's heroism had been celebrated so many times before, would now become the site of his final battle. The army of the Resistance was not a force for conquest, but for defense. They were fighting for their right to exist, for their right to be imperfect, and for their right to choose their own destiny. Chapter 7. The Roar of the Fallen. The air was thick with tension. The ground trembled with the rhythmic thud of a million marching boots. On the horizon, a dark cloud of smoke and dust heralded Mario's arrival. He did not come with a war cry, but with an unsettling silence. At the head of his army, he stood on the prow of a massive, black iron sky fortress, a chillingly calm figure, surrounded by the power of the superstar. Below him, his forces were an ocean of familiar faces: Koopa Troopas, Goombas, and Hammer Brother, all marching in a perfect, terrifying formation. Facing them at the castle gates was the Resistance. It was a chaotic, organic army of toads wielding spears, Koopas with their shells bristling, and various creatures united in a common cause: This was not a war of armies. It was a war of ideologies, order against chaos, submission against freedom. The first skirmish was swift and brutal. Mario's forces, with their rigid discipline, were winning. The Goombas, once simple-minded, now moved with a coordinated purpose, overwhelming the resistance with sheer numbers. The Koopa Troopas, unaccustomed to fighting without a fiery leader, were a single-minded, disciplined force. The air filled with the sounds of battle, the clash of shells against spears, and the frantic shouts of command. Bowser, watching from the castle balcony beside Peach, felt a pang of despair. Mario had corrupted his forces, twisted them into something unnatural. He could see their fear, their lack of joy in the fight. He knew every weakness, every strength of his own army. But Mario had turned them into automatons. They're just following orders. They're not fighting with purpose. They've forgotten what it feels like. Bowser's voice was a low, chest-shaking growl. Peach placed a hand on his massive arm. "You're their king, Bowser. Show them who you are. Remind them." He looked at her, then back at the battle, and a new fire burned in his eyes. It was not the fire of rage, but the fire of a king fighting for his family. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with air, and then let out a roar that was not of defiance or rage, but of a broken-hearted leader calling to his people. The sound was an earth-shaking, soulful thunder that resonated through the battlefield, a primal call that seemed to pierce the cold, sterile order of Mario's army. It was a language they understood. It was the sound of a king who had fought, lost, and now was asking for them to choose. And then the first Koopa Troopa hesitated. His shell, the very symbol of his family, had not responded to Mario's cold command, but had vibrated with the emotional resonance of Bowser's roar. Another one faltered. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, all across the battlefield, the Koopa Troopas stopped. They turned, not to their new master, but to their true king. In an instant, they turned on the Goombas and the other forces of Mario's army, their battle cries now filled with a renewed, ferocious purpose. The Hammer Brothers followed, then the Koopa Paratroopas. Mario, from his sky fortress, watched in stunned silence as his perfect, unthinking army was plunged into chaos. The forces of the resistance, seeing the tide turn, let out a cheer that shook the land. This was the first victory, not of power, but of heart. Bowser's army had not been defeated by Mario's magic. It had simply been waiting for its true king to call it home. Chapter 8. Brother versus Brother. The betrayal of the Koopa army was a wound Mario had never expected. His face, usually a mask of cold resolve, twisted in a snarl of furious disbelief. The superstar pulsed with an enraged, aggressive rhythm. They had defied him. They had chosen the monster over the hero. The world was clearly beyond salvation. It needed to be purged. "Fine," Mario snarled, his voice echoing across the battlefield, devoid of its former benevolence. "If you will not be saved, you will be destroyed." He raised a hand, and with a terrible, grinding sound, the sky fortress began to move. It was not going to fire. It was going to land. Mario leapt from the prow of the ship, a silhouette against the sun, the superstar, a blinding star in his chest. He descended with a horrifying speed, and when he hit the ground, It was with the force of a meteor. A shockwave erupted from his landing spot, a ring of pure force that slammed into the ground. It didn't discriminate. Koopas and toads, allies and former enemies, were all caught in the blast, thrown into the air like rag dolls, their bodies breaking against the unyielding force. Mario, now standing in a smoking crater, looked around at the chaos he had created, his face a chilling mix of rage and satisfaction. He began to walk towards the castle gates. He was no longer fighting. He was simply moving. The few remaining forces of the resistance that stood in his way were not met with fireballs or jumps, but with a horrifying, apathetic power. He would raise a hand, and a wall of stone would burst from the ground, crushing them. He would walk through a crowd, and their bodies would simply fall, their spirits extinguished by the oppressive, suffocating weight of the star's power. He did not need to fight them. He just needed to exist in their space. As he reached the castle gates, scarred and smoking from his landing, he found Luigi standing there alone. His brother's face was a mixture of fear, sorrow, and unshakable resolve. He was wearing his usual green tunic, but he held no weapon. He was not a fighter. He was a brother. "Mario, please, look at what you've done. Look at this madness. You're hurting everyone. This isn't you." Luigi's voice was strained, filled with pleading. Mario stopped, his glowing eyes fixed on his brother. For a brief, agonizing moment, a flicker of the old Mario, the kind, goofy hero, seemed to break through the armor of the star. He saw Luigi not as an enemy, but as his brother, standing in front of him, begging him to stop. But the superstar would not allow it. Its light flared, an internal explosion of pure, white-hot hatred. It reminded him of Peach's betrayal, of Bowser's deception, of Luigi's foolish naivete. It told him that Luigi was just another obstacle. "You're in the way, Luigi. Just like them." Mario's voice was flat and emotionless. He did not look at him with hatred, but with a terrible, empty disappointment. With a cold, dismissive motion, he simply pushed his brother aside. It was not a physical blow, but a telekinetic shove, an effortless flick of power that sent Luigi flying against the stone wall of the castle with a sickening thud. He was not aiming to kill. He was simply clearing a path. He walked past his crumpled brother and stepped through the smoking, splintered remains of the castle gate. The final battle was about to begin. Chapter 9. The Sorcerer's Last Stand. The castle halls were silent. Mario moved through them, the sound of his footsteps a hollow echo in the grand, empty space. He was on edge. He had expected a final, desperate defense. He had expected traps, ambushes, and legions of guards. But there was nothing. The halls were exactly as he had left them. The tapestries of his past victories hanging untouched, the floors polished, the air still and stale. He stopped in front of a giant tapestry depicting his very first victory over Bowser, a moment of pure, unadulterated heroism. The image showed him, small and determined, standing over a vanquished Bowser, a triumphant smile on his face. The old memory, the simple, honest joy of that first rescue, flickered in his mind. For a moment, the icy grip of the superstar loosened, and he saw himself not as the conqueror, but as the hero he had once been. A faint flicker of a smile, a ghost of his old self, touched his lips. Then, a soft click. A door at the far end of the hall, at the base of the grand staircase leading to the balcony, softly clicked shut. Mario's head snapped up, the brief moment of doubt gone, replaced by the star's cold certainty. He was being tested. He was being led into a trap. Show yourself. Mario's voice was a low hiss. A figure in a purple robe, a shadowy magician with a bony face and a single horn on his head, emerged from the shadows. It was Kamek, Bowser's loyal Magikoopa. Mario, you have defiled this sacred place. You have turned from a hero to a monster. This madness must end. Kamek's voice was a high-pitched, condemning cry. Kamek did not wait for a response. He teleported around the room, a blur of purple smoke, firing off volleys of green and purple magic. Mario dodged them, his superstar-fueled reflexes allowing him to move with impossible speed. He launched fireballs, but Kamek would simply disappear and reappear behind him, a flash of taunting cackles. You were a hero of justice, and now you are a tyrant. The peace was a gift, and you have thrown it away for your own selfish power. You are a fool. Kamek's voice was a rapid-fire assault of condemnation. Mario, perplexed by the unhittable target, noticed something in Kamek's frantic teleportation. As he zipped around the room, he was slapping the wall in several spots, a pattern, a sequence. Mario, focused on the sorcerer's words, didn't understand the purpose, but he was getting impatient. He was a conqueror. He should not be taunted by a simple magician. He charged, a fiery, blinding blur, but as he moved, a cage of pure magic, a lattice of glowing blue energy, erupted from the very stone of the floor. It snared him, restraining him in place. The magic was ancient, powered by the very heart of the castle. Kamek, his mission complete, floated to the center of the hall, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. The walls themselves have heard your rage, Mario. They have rejected you. Now you are a prisoner, and your reign of terror is at its end. Kamek's voice was a final, triumphant declaration. Mario struggled against the magical bonds, but they held fast. He glared at Kamek, a terrible hatred burning in his eyes. You and everyone else are fools. Bowser does not want peace. He wants a kingdom built on lies. He is the one who took the princess. Mario's voice was a cold snarl. Mario's hand, still free, began to glow with a terrible, dark light. He pulled his fist to his chest, and a new superstar, not of light, but of shadows, began to form in his palm. This is the true path. This is the only way to save them. The star gave me the truth. It gave me the power. Mario's voice was filled with a terrible awe. He took the new, corrupted star and slammed it into his chest, right where the old one had been. Power exploded from him, a violent, tearing force that ripped through the magical prison as if it were made of glass. The entire room shuddered. Mario let out a primal scream, a sound of agony and power as his body was consumed by the star's dark energy. His uniform shifted from blue and red to black and deep crimson, his cap morphing into a jagged, menacing crown. His eyes, once glowing with a cold light, now blazed with a terrifying, destructive purple energy. He looked at Kamek, no longer with anger, but with a terrifying, empty purpose. He grabbed the Magikoopa and slammed him against the wall. Before Mario could deliver the final, killing blow, Kamek, with a final burst of magical energy, disappeared in a puff of smoke. Mario did not care. He had won. The path to the balcony was now open. He walked towards the doorway, his every footstep leaving a dark, smoking mark that ate away at the very fabric of the castle floor. Chapter 10. A Kingdom Redeemed. The balcony was a stage for the final act. Peach and Bowser stood side by side, commanding their now united army. The sounds of battle still raged below, but they were winning. The tide had turned, and for the first time in a year, there was hope. They are retreating. We are winning. The kingdom is safe. Peach's voice was clear and strong. It's over, a cold voice said from behind them. They both spun around. Mario stood in the doorway, a figure of pure, terrifying darkness. His face was a mask of unholy power, his eyes twin points of purple fire. The very air around him seemed to crackle and die. Bowser stepped in front of Peach, his immense body a shield. You lost, Mario. Your army is in retreat. This is over. Go. Go now, and we can end this without more bloodshed. Bowser's voice was a low rumble of defiance. This is not a battle of armies, Bowser. This is a battle of will. And my will is absolute. I will not stop until the world is perfect. I will not stop until you are gone. Mario's voice was now filled with an unsettling serenity. Bowser turned to Peach. Go. Run. I'll hold him off. I'll buy you time. No. We're a team now, Bowser. This is our kingdom, our peace. We face him together. Peach's voice was firm and resolute. Mario sneered. A pathetic team, a king and his subject, a monster and his prize. Mario's tone dripped with contempt. The final battle began. Bowser and Peach fought with a new, coordinated ferocity. Bowser charged with a roar, and Mario met him with a devastating blast of dark energy. The two titans of their respective worlds collided, a blur of muscle and magic. Peach, not with fireballs, but with the subtle, life-giving power of her kingdom, summoned roots from the very stone of the balcony to entangle Mario, to slow him down, to confuse him. They were fighting with every ounce of their strength, every bit of their newfound trust. But Mario was a monster. He was not just a fighter. He was a force of destruction. He broke through Peach's bindings with a thought, and with a casual swing of his arm, he slammed Bowser against the parapet wall, leaving him dazed and wounded. Now for the prize. Mario's voice was a low, hungry growl. He raised a hand to finish them, but in that fleeting moment, Kamek, a spectral figure in the sky, appeared behind Mario, a last gasp of defiance. He charged a final, concentrated spell, a single, glowing orb of pure magic, aiming it at Mario's back. But Mario, with a terrible, casual awareness, turned his head, and with a flick of his wrist, fired a monstrous fireball covered in dark energy. It struck Kamek midair. The Magic Koopa exploded into a shower of purple sparks, his final, desperate attempt at heroism failing. The scene of Kamek's demise sent a wave of uncontrollable rage through Bowser. He saw not a loyal Koopa, but a family member, a friend, a father figure to his son. The rage, a primal, hot fire, surged through him, and his body swelled with its power. He lunged at Mario, a living volcano of fury, and wrapped his arms around him in a bear hug so tight that Mario's dark magic faltered. He squeezed, the superstar pulsating with a frantic, weakening light as it was crushed against Mario's chest. You are not a king. You are just a bully. Bowser's voice was a gravelly, pained growl. Peach saw her chance. With all of Mario's power being contained by Bowser's crushing grip, she lunged at him, her hands, no longer delicate, grabbing hold of what little of the star she could feel. She pulled with all her might, the power from the superstar lashing out at her, trying to consume her. But she held on. She was no longer a damsel. She was a ruler, fighting for her kingdom. With a final, agonizing heave, she ripped the superstar free from Mario's chest. Mario's body went slack. The power was gone. His eyes, the terrible purple fire, went out, and for a brief moment, they were just sad, tired eyes again. Bowser, a roaring triumph on his face, threw the now limp body of his rival to the ground. He raised a foot, charging it with fire, a killing blow ready. "This is for my kingdom. This is for Kamek." Bowser's voice was a growl of pure justice. "No!" Peach's voice was a desperate, final cry. Bowser's foot came down with a fiery, earth-shaking force. But it landed not on Mario, but next to his head. It was a roar of power, a display of strength, but not of murder. It was a show of mercy. The ground shook, the stone cracked, but Mario was alive. "We are not you. We will not become you. This is peace. My peace. Our peace." Epilogue: The Long Road to Peace. Mario was not killed. He was exiled. The superstar, its power, now dormant and inert, was kept in a sealed vault, a lesson in the dangers of absolute power. The lands he had conquered and perfected were a mess of shattered stone and broken ecosystems. Mario, stripped of his power, was sent to rebuild them, to live with the ghosts of his actions, a living monument to the danger of unyielding will. The Mushroom Kingdom was scarred, but a new era of peace had begun. Bowser and Peach, no longer king and princess, but rulers of a unified, imperfect, and free land, began the arduous task of rebuilding not just their homes, but their societies. Luigi, recovering from his injuries, watched them from the castle gardens. The throne remained empty, a silent testament to Peach's sacrifice and the long road ahead. One day, a massive, shadowy figure peered on the horizon. It was Bowser, alone. He walked to the castle gardens, his heavy footsteps unnaturally quiet, and placed a single, hardy, fire-resistant flower at the base of the statue they had erected to commemorate the end of the war. A simple, elegant statue of Peach, not as a ruler, but as a guardian, her hands outstretched in a gesture of unity. He looked at Luigi, who stood watching him, and for the first time there was no animosity between them, only a shared, weary understanding. Bowser gave a slow, solemn nod, a wordless promise of an unbreakable truce, then turned and walked away, not as a conqueror, but as just another survivor. The Mushroom Kingdom had learned the hardest of lessons, that villains could be born from saviors, that heroes could fall, and that the greatest victories often come not from a single person's power, but in the quiet courage and compassion of many. They were building a new future, one where true strength would be found not in the power of a single star, but in the enduring spirit of a united people.
What If Gaming Stories hopes you've enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe to What If Gaming Stories to support our channel. Until next time, keep asking, what if?